Haiku the Robot is an action-adventure platformer released by Mr. Morris Games in April of 2022. The game describes itself as cute, and while there are some cute characters in the game, it's also pretty bleak, taking place in Arcadia, a once great robot utopia that has since decayed into rust and ruin. As players make their way through what remains of this once great land, dodging the corrupted machines, talking to the few survivors that are left, and reading the lore tablets scattered around its ruins, they eventually learn what led to Arcadia's downfall, as well as what Haiku's role is in bringing about its restoration. The game received 2 free content updates called Corrupt Mode and Obscure Information, which introduced more lore to the game that helped deepen its world and make the story feel more complete. However, they also made it more difficult to see the full story of the game, as the lore is now scattered across different game modes in addition to being scattered across the world. So, to make it easier to see it all, let's gather all the information from the game, and with no restraint on spoilers, go through the history of Arcadia so we can see the full story of Haiku the Robot. The story starts on planet Earth. Long ago, human civilizations thrived on its surface, but as they developed and expanded, they deprived the planet of its natural resources, which led to competition between the various societies of the planet. Eventually, this competition turned violent, and as the years went on, it escalated until everything came to an abrupt, explosive end with an all-out nuclear war. In the aftermath of the destruction, the surface of the Earth was left a ruined hellscape, where the once colossal structures of humanity stood as blasted-out ruins. Making matters worse, the fallout from the nuclear bombs contaminated the water supply, and as the rain laced with radioactivity fell on the surface, it washed away the hope that any survivors had of picking up the pieces and starting anew. With a few fell strokes, humanity had seemingly rendered itself, and possibly the rest of life on Earth, extinct. But that wasn't totally the case. While the surface had become a wasteland unsuitable for life, the story underground was different. But the life that emerged there was a different sort than what had existed on the surface before. It was not biological in nature, but mechanical. The robots, machines, and programs of the humans, being hardy enough to survive the nuclear apocalypse, and now being suddenly free from the winds of their fleshy masters, took to the crust of the planet and, over the course of several centuries, built civilizations of their own in the subterranean depths of the Earth. One of these civilizations was a society named Arcadia, which had been built by 4 sibling robots: Neutron, Proton, Electron, and Atom. Through the work and ingenuity of the siblings, who came to be known as the Creators, Arcadia became a land that had everything a machine needed. There was a furnace that smelted metal and steel to manufacture spare parts to repair their bodies or to use for their buildings and houses. There was a massive central core which charged their batteries and electrical systems, providing power to everyone. There was an elaborate factory facility where new machines, programs, and robots were constructed for Arcadia. And at its center was a huge mainframe vault, which was essential to ensuring all the various components of Arcadia ran smoothly and without issue. As it grew and grew, Arcadia soon gained a reputation as a utopia for robots and programs. A place they could live in bliss. One of the principles that guided the Arcadians was the concept of the grand calculus, which was an equation that the world checked itself against to ensure it stayed in balance. If some event or action were to take place that tilted things too far to one side of the equation, an opposing event would eventually take place that would balance the equation back out again. In fact, the downfall of humanity was looked at as an example of this equation in action. As the humans selfishly took and consumed from the natural world, they threw the equation out of balance, necessitating their removal from the world in order to bring the grand calculus back in balance. This perceived violation of the rules of the grand calculus meant that most of the Arcadians saw their predecessors as inferior to themselves. However, the Arcadians were not immune to some of the supposed flaws of humanity, being guilty of the very same behaviors. For instance, despite mocking the humans for fighting wars over their differences, the Arcadians saw some of the other machines in the world as pests or parasites, such as the Helm Dwellers, who took residence in the darkest tunnels of their water ducts after fleeing from the devastation of the surface, or the Aneladrills, robots that gorged themselves on the disgusting wastes that littered the world. There were also Arcadians that knowingly caused issues for others in their community, like a troublemaker that built contraptions that blocked mapping signals from being received by others. Even the creators were susceptible to the trappings of humanity, evidenced by their vain pursuit of having shrines and statues erected across Arcadia to commemorate their work in building the society. These character similarities were likely due to a vestigial human influence that was in the creators, a byproduct of their creation. In the final days of humanity, in one of the bunkers that held the remnants of the species, 4 scientists, recognizing they were doomed to extinction, even if they escaped the war due to their overexploitation of the planet's resources, uploaded their minds into robot bodies in order to survive the impending apocalypse and ensure that some remnant of humanity would live on. Although they had been successful in their effort, the memories of the scientists had been wiped in the process, meaning when they awoke as the creators, they didn't remember where they came from nor who built them. As such, they lambasted humanity for what they did to the world as they went about building Arcadia, which likewise affected the perception the machines of their society had of their biological predecessors. However, not all Arcadians viewed humanity with contempt. There were some that were sympathetic to them and could recognize their potential for good. One such Arcadian was Adam, the 4th creator. Unlike its siblings, whose programming was focused on a mechanical function of some kind, Adam's programming centered on life. And centuries after the downfall of biological life on the surface of the Earth, it discovered something amazing in the rocks below Arcadia. It found life. While it was only some basic flora, it was still an amazing discovery. And it got Adam thinking. Perhaps it could cultivate this flora and bring life back to the Earth. Then, possibly remembering its past as a human scientist, Adam thought that if it worked hard enough, it could bring humanity back. It decided mankind deserved another chance, albeit with some changes. Namely, it would be kept under supervision and provided guidance so that it didn't repeat the mistakes of its past. Its decision made, Adam then started a project named Rebirth to make this dream a reality. It built a research lab deep in the bowels of Arcadia, close to the ruins where the flora was blossoming, and conducted a variety of experiments to expand its knowledge on biological life, such as building machines that held plants on their head, or tinkering with elements like phosphorus to find the right ingredients needed to cultivate life. While Adam was excited by its research, the other creators didn't share in its enthusiasm in seeing the return of biological life to the world, believing it would doom Arcadia and the mechanical life that lived there. They attempted to persuade Adam to give up the project, but no matter what they said, they couldn't dissuade their sibling. And when they saw that Adam had crafted molds in its lab to be used to construct its new life forms, signaling the culmination of its work, they knew they had to take immediate, drastic action to stop the seed of mankind from taking root. Thus, the creators developed a virus to be used against their youngest sibling to wipe out its programming and ensure Project Rebirth would never be completed. Sadly, it was a response that Adam saw coming. Despite the betrayal, though, Adam took solace in the fact that whatever fate befell it would change nothing, as the work it had done had already taken root in the world, meaning life would one day return to Arcadia. But contradictingly, also knew its work didn't matter, as even without its help, life was always going to find a way back into existence, as it had an unrivaled strength and stubbornness that was greater than anything else in the world. Not soon after, the virus of the creators infected Adam. But then something happened that the creators did not expect. Although the virus did manage to wipe out Adam's programming and prevent it from continuing to work on Project Rebirth, it did not completely destroy it. In fact, as the virus worked its way through the creator's system, it underwent a mutation itself, which resulted in its own programming being changed, perhaps a result of the power Adam wielded. Thus, instead of an outright destruction of Adam, the two beings combined and created a whole new entity. And this new entity, still knowing the hurt of the betrayal Adam suffered at the hands of the other creators, gave itself a new purpose. It was going to use its viral powers to infect all the machines and robots of Arcadia in order to destroy the civilization. It did so with incredible efficiency, getting its corruption into nearly every single machine and program of Arcadia. Just like with Adam, when the virus infected one of the Arcadians, its programming was erased, but the regular Arcadians didn't have the same strength that Adam did, meaning when their code was deleted, it was permanent. Some tried to counteract the effects, such as the machines in the incinerator who believed the virus was a result of them upsetting an idol in some way, and changed their programming to revere the flames of the incinerator, sacrificing themselves to appease them. But, of course, that didn't work. Nothing anyone tried did, and with parts of their programming missing, the Arcadians began to experience a change in behavior, becoming increasingly erratic, with most becoming aggressive and violent. Eventually, after enough damage to their systems had been done, the Arcadians shut down. As more and more machines went offline, the network of workers that kept Arcadia running smoothly was lost. And without anyone to maintain its systems, Arcadia soon fell to ruin. The remaining creators saw what was happening to their utopia, how the virus was hell-bent on destroying it. So to prevent it from achieving its goal, they sealed off the mainframe vault to prevent Arcadia from fully falling to the virus. However, before they could take more direct measures against the virus themselves, they too were infected by it. Unlike the rest of the Arcadians, the creators had the power to resist the influence of the virus. So instead of being destroyed, they were put into a comatose state where they could do nothing as Arcadia was destroyed around them. Their only hope was that someday, something would come along and save Arcadia. And luckily enough, something did. The development of the virus had shifted the balance of the grand calculus, and just as the principal said, a counteracting chain of events occurred in order to bring things back in balance. It all started with the awakening of a robot named Verse in Adam's research labs. Although Verse did not know Arcadia before it fell, it knew that its current state in the world was wrong, an error brought about by the terrible virus that needed to be corrected. It started running various calculations and simulations to find out how to stop the virus, but couldn't get them to come out right. An important variable was missing. That variable came in the form of one of Adam's experiments, a small humanoid robot named Haiku. Haiku appeared to be the culmination of Adam's work, the new human that could be watched over and guided by the creators and Arcadians, and as such may have been made of mechanical as well as biological components. Unlike the rest of the machines in Arcadia, Haiku proved particularly resilient against the virus, which may have been due to the biological parts of its makeup, components that the virus, which had been designed to only work on machines, had no method of dealing with. Whatever the case was, it was clear that Haiku was not affected by the virus like the rest of the Arcadians were, giving it a freedom to explore Arcadia like no other. However, while Haiku was protected against the virus, it was still susceptible to the attacks of those infected by it. But to protect itself from these crazed machines, Haiku used a tool that no other Arcadian had. A large broadsword named the Kill Switch Sword. Thus, with these protections afforded to it, after Haiku was woken up by the virus, seemingly at the behest of some influence of Adam within it, it began to explore the ruins of Arcadia. Not long into its adventures, it was found by Verse, who recognized that Haiku was the missing variable in its calculations. After explaining the situation Arcadia was in, Verse convinced the small robot to assist it in its cause. Verse explained that if they could unlock the mainframe vault, then the virus who was trying to access the vault would be lured there, where it could then be eliminated by Haiku, thereby freeing Arcadia from its corruption. To unlock the vault, Haiku would need to find the 3 remaining creators in Arcadia and convince them to help by breaking the locks to open the doors. A task that was easier said than done, as not only were the creators in some of the most dangerous areas in Arcadia, but since being infected by the virus, the program had managed to take control of their systems and make the creators attack Haiku when they saw the little robot. But with the power of the kill switch sword, Haiku managed to purge the virus from each one of the surviving creators, restoring their consciousness. As thanks, the creators bestowed a portion of their power to Haiku by powering up a node on the kill switch sword, and then headed off to the vault. Once all 3 had been rescued, they broke the remaining locks on the mainframe vault to open it up, and, just as Verse suspected, the virus immediately appeared and swarmed inside. Haiku followed it within and destroyed the malignant program before it could destroy Arcadia. However, Haiku's job wasn't over yet. After the encounter in the mainframe vault, Verse ran more calculations and found that the grand calculus still hadn't stabilized, meaning the root of the evil affecting Arcadia was still out in the world. Verse woke Haiku back up and pulled its companion down into the forgotten ruins in the depths of Arcadia, where a large temple named the Lost Archives, a place where the knowledge of Arcadia was stored, was located. Here, Verse shared an epiphany it had with Haiku. Both of them had been created with the purpose to restore balance to Arcadia, but Verse was only meant to counteract the virus. Haiku was the one that would restore true balance to Arcadia, and it was Verse's role to help it. The door to the temple had been sealed up and would only unlock in the presence of all 4 creators. Upon destroying the virus, its power had flowed into the kill switch sword, meaning Haiku technically had the power needed to open the vault. But the door refused to open as, due to the corruption that Adam had suffered at the hands of the virus, the lock didn't recognize its power. Verse solved this problem by giving up its life to purify Adam's node on the blade, thereby accomplishing the purpose of its awakening and allowing the temple to open. Among the records inside the building, Haiku found an old computer that showed it the horrible truth: that Adam had been betrayed by its siblings, who unleashed the virus that would doom it, and eventually the rest of Arcadia. Upon realizing their secret was out, all 3 creators, Neutron, Proton, and Electron, attacked Haiku, determined to eliminate the small robot to keep the truth from getting out. However, Haiku's destiny wouldn't be denied, and despite facing 3-on-1 odds, Haiku eliminated the creators one by one until finally, all of them had been destroyed, thereby fully rooting out the evil in Arcadia and bringing balance back to the world. As the kill switch sword dissolved away, signifying its purpose had been completed, a new era dawned on Arcadia, one where biological life and machines would live together in harmony, thus bringing an end to the story of Haiku the robot. It's one that's heavily influenced by the concept of change, as exemplified by the main conflict of the story. On one side, you had the creators, who were resistant to the change coming to the world, and on the other side, you had Adam, who embraced it. Ultimately, the creators, giving in to their fear of change and of the unknown, did something that they believed would prevent the change they so feared, but in an ironic twist, actually ushered it in, and in a way that destroyed everything they loved. It just goes to show that change is inevitable, and since it's impossible to prevent it, your best course of action is to embrace it and try to understand what's coming, which gives you some semblance of control and by extension, comfort. Now, I didn't cover everything in the game. There's quite a few quirky side characters that have little stories of their own, but this should cover everything for the main story. I think I laid it all out pretty well, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. Now, I don't usually do plugs like this, and I promise this video isn't sponsored or anything, but Haiku was made by a super small team. I'm pretty sure it was only one guy, Jordan Morris, in addition to being self-published. So if you liked the video and are interested in the game, go buy the game to show some support to the developer. It's available on Steam and Nintendo Switch as of now, so you have a couple of different ways to play it. Personally, I think it's well worth the purchase, not only because it's super fun, but because you can tell the amount of heart and soul that went into it. And you know, Jordan deserves to be rewarded for his work and dedication. Alright, last thing before I go, I'd like to remind you that every episode is uploaded to Spotify, so feel free to listen over there if that's easier for you. But that'll be it for this one. Until next time, thank you for watching, and see you later.